Ok, allez, c'est parti. Bonsoir à tous. Merci de nous rejoindre pour ce webinaire sur les études de tourisme et d'hôtellerie et de hospitality management, on appelle ça en anglais, à l'étranger. Je m'appelle Marc, je suis le directeur de Study Expérience en France, qui est une agence qui a pour habitude d'accompagner les étudiants qui ont un projet d'études à l'étranger. Et puis, je suis rejoint aujourd'hui par Lucy Hendry et Claire Jones de l'université de Oxford Brookes, qui est vraiment l'une des références mondiales dans le domaine de hospitality management. Et du coup, voilà, qui va nous faire le plaisir de nous présenter les études d'hôtellerie de manière générale pour vous donner des informations sur peut-être pourquoi étudier cette filière et vers quoi ça peut mener. Et puis évidemment, ils vous parleront aussi de leur formation. Alors, je vais prendre la main pour commencer, peut-être pour introduire le sujet et peut-être plus largement pour introduire le sujet des études à l'étranger, pourquoi ça peut être une bonne idée d'envisager cette option-là. Je vais du coup partager mon écran et peut-être couper la caméra pour privilégier la bande passante. Si ça ne vous dérange pas, voilà, tac. Voilà, en espérant que vous puissiez voir l'écran. Ce que je préciserai aussi, en fait, si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à les poser pendant le webinaire dans l'onglet questions-réponses tout en bas de votre écran. On essaiera d'y répondre en direct si on peut, puis on vous donnera évidemment aussi nos coordonnées pour que vous puissiez nous contacter par la suite si besoin. Voilà. Écoutez, pour commencer, une question toute bête pour tous les étudiants de manière générale, quelle que soit la filière que vous envisagez par la suite. Pourquoi étudier à l'étranger? Il y a tout un tas de raisons qui peuvent l'expliquer. Déjà, le fait de partir peut tout simplement vous ouvrir l'esprit, vous faire découvrir de nouvelles cultures, de nouvelles façons de faire, d'apprendre. Évidemment, et c'est d'autant plus important dans le domaine du tourisme et de l'hôtellerie, c'est l'opportunité d'apprendre une autre langue, voire plusieurs langues, et ça peut être valorisant dans ce secteur-là, mais aussi de manière générale. C'est rare aujourd'hui quand même de trouver des postes qui ne nécessitent pas la maîtrise d'au moins une autre langue en plus du français. Surtout, vous allez développer ce qu'on appelle en anglais les soft skills, c'est-à-dire vraiment plein de choses qu'on n'apprend pas forcément sur les bancs d'une école. Je pense à l'autonomie, à l'indépendance, à la prise d'initiative, toutes ces choses qui vont être finalement valorisées par les employeurs dans un deuxième temps, qui vous aident aussi à grandir en tant que personne, à gagner en maturité, à apprendre à vous connaître aussi. Et ça, c'est des choses vraiment en sortant un petit peu de votre zone de confort et en allant découvrir comment on fait les choses ailleurs, dans une nouvelle culture. Voilà, forcément, vous allez apprendre ces choses-là et ça peut que vous rendre plus attractif vis-à-vis d'employeurs potentiels par la suite. C'est une opportunité assez sympa pour développer aussi votre réseau personnel et professionnel. Évidemment, vous allez vous faire des amis du monde entier, en sachant que les universités alors anglo-saxonnes, puisqu'on va quand même surtout parler de formations qui sont dispensées en anglais aujourd'hui, elles accueillent énormément d'étudiants étrangers également, en plus des étudiants locaux. Ça peut parfois représenter 30 ou 40% des effectifs, ce qui est quand même beaucoup. Donc, c'est l'opportunité vraiment de rencontrer des étudiants qui viennent de partout, qui seront peut-être vos amis, peut-être de futurs collaborateurs, de futurs clients, de futurs employeurs. On sait aujourd'hui à quel point c'est important d'avoir un réseau voilà, pour pouvoir naviguer un petit peu le marché de l'emploi, notamment par la suite. Donc voilà, là vous avez un environnement idéal pour développer un réseau à l'international et accéder peut-être à des opportunités en dehors de la France. Et donc tout ça, ça vous permet, comme je l'ai dit à plusieurs reprises, vraiment de vous distinguer sur le marché de l'emploi et de manière peut-être plus, euh, plus impressionnante encore qu'un étudiant, par exemple, qui partirait faire un semestre d'études simplement à l'étranger ou un séjour linguistique ou des choses comme ça, qui évidemment sont valorisantes aussi. Mais le fait vraiment de partir faire un diplôme entier en langue étrangère, pour le coup, il y a moins de personnes qui sont prêtes à faire cet effort-là. Et voilà, vous arrivez vraiment de ce fait à vous différencier par rapport à d'autres candidats. Et puis, les universités anglophones vont aussi avoir beaucoup d'avantages qu'on ne trouve pas forcément en France. Il y a quand même un nombre impressionnant d'universités, d'écoles, alors quand je dis prestigieuses, du moins bien classées, que vous allez trouver en haut des classements internationaux. C'est vrai que c'est quand même archi dominé par les universités, les établissements anglo-saxons. Vous allez trouver aussi une approche pédagogique qui est différente, beaucoup plus participative, c'est-à-dire qu'on s'attend à ce que les étudiants en classe participent activement au cours qui leur est dispensé, avec un rapport aussi privilégié avec les professeurs, hein, c'est-à-dire que ce serait presque mal vu de ne pas échanger avec votre professeur, de ne pas débattre de certains sujets. Les cours, on va dire, sont là vraiment pour approfondir une thématique que vous aurez pris soin de réviser en amont, plutôt que pour vous livrer les bases, en fait. L'idée dans ce système-là, c'est que les bases, vous pouvez peut-être les acquérir ou les découvrir tout seul, en fait, de manière autonome par de la recherche. Alors, dirigée toujours, hein, on va vous donner des livres à lire ou des travaux dirigés ou des choses comme ça. Mais voilà, en classe, vous arrivez pour vérifier que vous avez bien compris justement ces bases, les développer, les argumenter, en débattre. Et voilà, c'est une approche beaucoup plus participative à l'enseignement. Avec beaucoup de flexibilité aussi, à la fois au niveau des cours, c'est-à-dire que vous aurez toujours pas mal de choix et d'options pendant vos études. Euh, parfois même, c'est parfois même possible de combiner deux domaines totalement différents ou dans le cadre d'une formation de tourisme, par exemple, y associer une autre matière qui n'a pas forcément de lien direct. Ça, c'est possible, mais une flexibilité aussi au niveau des débouchés. Et ça, vous allez le voir, je pense, et le comprendre davantage lors de la présentation de Claire dans un instant. Mais souvent, voilà, vous n'êtes pas obligé d'étudier ce que vous allez faire comme travail par la suite. Donc, vous pouvez très bien faire des études de tourisme, par exemple, mais derrière, travailler en entreprise dans d'autres domaines ou dans le domaine culturel. Il y a plein de choses vraiment que vous pouvez faire, contrairement peut-être à la France où, si je caricature un petit peu, on est obligé de faire la formation qui correspond au poste qu'on souhaite faire. Dans les pays anglo-saxons, c'est pas comme ça. Vous avez vraiment une grande flexibilité. Je donne souvent l'exemple de la personne qui fait une licence de philosophie et qui derrière devient expert comptable, par exemple. Ce serait très difficile de faire la même chose en France, mais dans les pays anglo-saxons, c'est assez courant. Le système le permet. Et puis, voilà, dans ces pays-là, vous allez aussi trouver cette culture du campus résidentiel, donc les étudiants qui logent sur le campus, qui ont tout au même endroit, avec des installations souvent assez incroyables. Je pense que Oxford Brookes est un bel exemple à ce niveau-là. Et puis, je sais que Claire a prévu de vous parler un petit peu du campus aussi. Et voilà, donc je lui laisserai le soin de vous donner cet exemple-là. Alors, ce que vous risquez d'entendre comme mots, on va dire, pendant cette présentation, pour vous situer aussi au niveau des équivalences par rapport au diplôme. On va peut-être vous parler de ces différents niveaux d'études-là. Vous avez, pour commencer, le niveau Foundation qui s'adresse aux étudiants qui soit n'ont pas tout à fait les prérequis académiques, qui n'ont pas tout à fait les notes nécessaires au bac, par exemple, ou qui, au niveau de la langue, sont un petit peu fébriles. On peut faire ce qu'on appelle une année de foundation, qui est une année de préparation universitaire. Vous allez vous préparer pour bien comprendre justement le système éducatif en question, et aussi pour appréhender la langue, évidemment, et plus facilement appréhender la licence à proprement parler dans un deuxième temps, en ayant, on l'espère, du coup, plus de réussite et de meilleurs résultats par la suite. C'est souvent une bonne idée pour les étudiants étrangers, à vrai dire, cette année transitoire en plus qui facilite quand même l'intégration. On va souvent parler des bachelors, hein, c'est l'équivalent de la licence, qui sont en 3 ou 4 ans selon le pays. Et c'est surtout, je pense, de cette formation-là dont on parlera aujourd'hui. Mais sachez qu'il existe aussi des formations un petit peu plus courtes, en 2 ans, un petit peu équivalentes au BTS ou au DUT en France, et notamment dans les domaines qu'on va évoquer aujourd'hui du tourisme. Et puis enfin, vous avez le niveau master, voilà, qui se fait en 1 an ou 2. Au Royaume-Uni, donc Oxford Brookes étant une université britannique, les masters se font presque toujours en 1 an. Donc ça, c'est bon à savoir s'il y en a qui envisagent cette option-là, en sachant que c'est 1 an, mais ça équivaut bien à un Master 2 en France. Alors aujourd'hui, on va parler de quelles études, hein, les études de tourisme et d'hôtellerie de manière générale, ça recouvre différentes choses. Il y a la gestion hôtelière, ce qu'on appelle hotel management. Mais vous avez aussi, au sens plus large, hospitality. Et ça, je pense que je laisserai Claire le soin de vous expliquer ça dans un deuxième temps, parce qu'elle a prévu vraiment de vous expliquer ce qui rentre dans la catégorie de hospitality. Elle le fera beaucoup mieux que moi. Mais voilà, évidemment, le tourisme. Il y a l'événementiel qui rentre là-dedans, tout ce qui est loisirs aussi, ou restauration, ce genre de choses-là. Voilà tous les domaines, on va dire, qui rentrent dans ce domaine d'études dont on va parler aujourd'hui. Et puis, alors c'est un domaine où on va souvent faire la distinction entre les écoles et les universités. Alors aujourd'hui, c'est une université, hein, Oxford Brookes, qui est avec nous. Mais vous avez aussi les écoles hôtellières, hein, dont on parle beaucoup, les plus connues étant voilà, EHL ou Glion, César Ritz, les endroits comme ça. Là, c'est plutôt des écoles spécialisées dans la formation hôtelière spécifiquement, plutôt de luxe, qui vont avoir une pédagogie qui leur est propre aussi. On pourra tout à l'heure peut-être évoquer de manière plus détaillée la différence entre ces écoles justement et l'apprentissage qu'on peut avoir à l'université. La liste que vous voyez là, ce sont c'est le top 15 des universités au monde selon le classement QS. Donc, vous pouvez voir, les 2 meilleures universités au monde dans ce domaine-là sont les universités de Surrey et de Oxford Brookes, 2 universités britanniques. Donc, du coup, voilà, les autres étant des écoles hôtelières, mais du coup, qui ne feront peut-être pas tout ce qui est tourisme, hospitality au sens large et des choses comme ça. Ça, c'est plutôt à l'université qu'on va trouver ces formations. Et donc, après ces études-là, et encore une fois, Claire va approfondir ce sujet-là, mais c'est juste pour vous donner peut-être la perspective française par rapport à tout ça. Évidemment, si vous faites une licence dans ce domaine-là, vous pouvez envisager une spécialisation au niveau master si vous le souhaitez. Beaucoup d'étudiants, ceci étant dit, travaillent indirectement après la licence. C'est très français d'envisager le bac plus 5 de manière systématique. Au Royaume-Uni, en l'occurrence, je pense que, Claire nous le confirmera, mais la plupart des étudiants travaillent après la licence. Mais vous pouvez aussi, je vous parlais de flexibilité tout à l'heure au niveau des débouchés, vous pouvez faire un master dans un tout autre domaine si vous le souhaitez aussi, c'est une possibilité. Vous pouvez revenir en France et intégrer des formations et notamment des grandes écoles ou aussi des écoles hôtelières ou des choses comme ça si vous le souhaitez, parce qu'on appelle l'admission parallèle, en tout cas pour les grandes écoles. Et voilà, et comme je vous le disais, évidemment, la possibilité d'intégrer directement le marché de l'emploi. Et honnêtement, c'est ce que font la plupart des étudiants après avoir validé une première formation, donc du coup de 3 ou 4 ans dans ce domaine-là. Bon, voilà tout pour moi à ce stade. Je reviendrai vous parler tout à l'heure des critères d'admission plus spécifiquement Et voilà, comment rentrer dans... Attendez, je vais me remettre en live. Tac. Mais voilà, à ce stade, je préfère passer la main à Claire, qui est vraiment voilà, la spécialiste de hospitality management. Claire, I don't know if you understood any of that at all. I was saying how awful Oxford Brookes is.
I speak pretty good French, actually, Mark. So
brilliant.
Unlucky for you. Yeah, I was listening with interest.
Would you like to present in English or in French, Claire?
Ha! My French is not as good as yours, sadly. It's a long time since I was in France. I think I'm going to start the slides, and then I think Lucy's got the first few things to say. Just a little bit of background about Oxford Brookes, just to, hi everybody, just to follow up on what Mark was saying. I think we'd definitely like to give you some insights into what it's like studying in Oxford. It's a pretty great place to be. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the kind of things you might study, the opportunities. Really going to try and leave as much space as possible at the end for your questions as well. So I'm going to start my slides up, and then Lucy's going to take over just for the first few moments. So I'll share my screen. So over to you, Lucy.
Ok, thanks very much, Claire. Alors, bonsoir à tous. Je m'appelle Lucie, comme Marc l'a dit, je travaille dans l'équipe globale d'Oxford Brookes. I'm going to also present in English because my level of French is also not at the same standard as Mark's. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview about Oxford Brookes before I hand over to Claire, who will focus in on the hospitality and tourism area. So I don't know how many of you have heard of Oxford Brookes. If anyone has been to Oxford, maybe let us know in the chat. It would also be great to hear which of you are interested in studying a bachelor degree, and maybe which of you are interested in studying a master's degree. And when you're thinking about starting your course studies, feel free to type that into the chat box. It just will be really great to understand who is joining us today. So a little bit about Oxford. So Oxford as a city, I'm sure that you're very familiar with. It's the cultural capital of the United Kingdom, some might say. It's a historic and cultural city, very much a student city. So it's very much a place that is geared up for young people to be able to study there. 1 in 4 adults living in Oxford are actually students. Now that's because we have 2 universities in the city. So we have Oxford University, which is the very old kind of traditional university that many of you, I'm sure, will already have heard of. Oxford Brookes is, we like to think of ourselves as the cool university in the city, so we're the modern one. We are actually the top modern university in the UK, so we have a fantastic reputation in our own right. And we also have a great reputation in lots of different subject areas, including our hospitality courses. So we're amongst the top in the world for hospitality, and I'm sure Claire will tell you a bit more about that later. Another great fact about Oxford that you might not know, as well as being a historic city, the city of Harry Potter, the city of beautiful architecture, we're also a centre for industry and enterprise. So we have lots of companies connected in the Oxford and Oxfordshire area. We're just an hour away from London, so that makes us an ideal location when it comes to kind of professional development and career opportunities and guest speakers. And just if you want to go to London to go and see a show or socialise or explore the city as well. So it's a really great place to study. Just my last point really to say is our connection with Oxford University. So as you already know, Oxford Brookes is the cool one, but we can still connect up with Oxford University through our access to the Bodleian Library. That's the famous, world famous university library, University of Oxford Library. They have access to every published book. And you can also join the Oxford Union. It's also an Oxford University club, and it's a kind of debating society. So we get lots of very big names, very well-known people who are professionals within their industry. And you have the opportunity to network with all of these different people if you join as a member of the Oxford Union. So you can do that even as an Oxford Brookes student. So that's just a snapshot about Oxford and Oxford Brookes, and I'm now going to pass over to Claire.
I knew I wouldn't get through this without speaking with my microphone muted. But just before I move on to talking about hospitality, out of all these fantastic images that we've got here, we did mention talking about what it's like being a student in Oxford. That central image is the main high street in the city, and you can see some of the kind of cultural heritage there that Lucy was talking about. But those images on the side show one of our main teaching buildings on campus, what we call the Forum, which is a large space where students gather to study and drink coffee and talk and all kinds of other stuff. And within that building, we also have our library, which is on the kind of the right-hand side there. You know, it's been a weird year with the pandemic, but that's what it normally looks like. We'll be back on campus in September. I just wanted to kind of follow up on one thing that Lucy said, which is the student feel in Oxford. It's one of the things that my students kind of tell me about the most. It's one of the things they really like about being in Oxford, that it's a very student city. There's lots to do for young people. It's a really great kind of location, and I agree. I live in Oxford as well. So let's talk a little bit about hospitality and tourism. There's another picture of our campus. The main image on your screen here is the teaching team that I work with. And I wanted to highlight my team because we're very diverse. And I think cultural diversity is a really important aspect of what we do. It's very important in a global industry such as travel and tourism and hospitality. I've got colleagues from, I think, pretty much every continent in the world, except at the moment we don't have anybody from Australia. But I've got a colleague from South America, several colleagues from China and Southeast Asia, across Europe, as well as the Caribbean and then the UK. And you know, they are drawn to work at Oxford Brookes in the School of Hospitality Management because of our reputation, which I know Mark told you a little bit about earlier. It is a fantastic place to work, to study, to undertake research, and these are all kind of elements or ingredients in our reputation, I would say. I'm the programme lead for the undergraduate programme in Hospitality and Tourism Management. I work very closely with my colleagues in the postgraduate team who run the master's programme. But my area of expertise, I suppose, is the bachelor undergraduate programme. So that's a part of my focus today is going to talk a little bit about that programme, but I can answer questions about anything, whatever you want to know. So one of the things I wanted to talk about at the start is the scope of these industries. I'm not going to go through every single item in this umbrella. I quite like the image of an umbrella. We tend to, when we talk about hospitality, we tend to think about hotels and maybe restaurants. We don't think as often about recreation, about travel and tourism in more general terms, about leisure, also about events management. We have a separate programme focused on events management at Oxford Brookes. You know, they might argue that events management is a separate kind of subject area. We definitely see events management as being very closely connected to tourism and hospitality. There are some shared modules where the programs are similar, but we work very closely with our colleagues in events management. And indeed, lots of my students get involved in events management, either as a part-time job during their program with us or when they graduate. I did pick up on one of Mark's comments about, you know, what you might do at the end of the course. It is most common for students who graduate from the undergraduate bachelor degree to go into work, often into what's called a graduate scheme, which is often an 18-month or 2-year program of training and development with one of the main multinational employers around the world. And that kind of scheme will often involve working in different parts of the business, kind of as is represented in my umbrella diagram. So you might work in front office, you might work in some of the food and beverage outlets, you might work with reception, you might work with housekeeping, partly to kind of really deepen your understanding of the business, but also to see where you might want to work more permanently once that period is up. So the main point of this image really, I think, is just for me to really reinforce the variety of opportunities in hospitality and tourism. I undertake tutorials with my first years every year, and when I talk to them again in the final year of the programme, it's almost always the case that their ambitions and their direction have changed as they learn more about the opportunities open to them. So lots of different directions that you might go. It does matter. Hospitality and tourism is a big employer around the world, has a big impact, creates a lot of opportunities, accounts for, in normal times for a large proportion of the global economy. By most estimates, around 10% of jobs globally are connected to travel and tourism. There's a lot more connected to that than you might think. One of our colleagues that's just recently joined the teaching team at Oxford Brookes has a specialism in what's called heritage tourism. So you might want to go and visit where Game of Thrones was filmed, or Lucy mentioned Harry Potter. There are Harry Potter locations in Oxford. This is heritage cultural tourism. It's not something that we always think about when we think about travel and tourism. We tend to think about more maybe traditional holidays. It's very, very varied. Again, lots of really interesting opportunities. The OECD did some work a couple of years ago predicting kind of 2020 some of the trends in terms of gross domestic product, GDP, the proportion of employment across their member states, and again, the contribution that it makes to the economy. So not really going anywhere in terms of importance and opportunities for getting involved. There are lots of really exciting future trends, many of which we've been talking to our students about in the last couple of years. Sustainability is rising up the agenda. In fact, one of the most popular modules that my students choose at the moment is in sustainable business. It's really interesting, I think, if you're a student of any kind of business and management discipline, to find out how we might run our businesses in a more sustainable and ethical way. It's also really useful, I think, as a kind of career mechanism. It's something employers are really interested in to learn about. So when my students go into a job interview and they can talk quite knowledgeably about sustainable business practice, it's very attractive as well. Lots of different types of hospitality and tourism venues and locations, thinking more about tourism impact as well. So when we design interventions, what the impact is on the local community, the local environment. Technology is a really exciting area as well, whether that's AI in a hotel, enabling rooms using iPads, that kind of stuff. And what we have seen in the last 12 months, obviously it's been a difficult time for the hospitality and tourism industry, but there's been a huge amount of innovation. And again, some of the most popular modules at Brookes look at entrepreneurship, designing a new business, running your own business, taking a creative approach to solving business problems. It is important at university to learn about theories. I've been working on a final year module where we teach about leadership theory to the students, but we're only really interested about how we apply those theories in practice. So theory is great, and that feels like what we come to university for. We want to do something academic, but theory is only really useful if it's applied to unlocking what's happening in the world, solving problems, exploring options. So I would say everything we do in the business school, certainly on the programs that I'm involved with, is about the application of theory to what's actually happening, and it's what's happening now. So the reason I know about all of this stuff and about the future trends and about what's happening in industry right now is because I can say with certainty that on every single module that we have guest speakers who may be typically senior industry professionals who come in to talk to the students about what's going on. And of course, over the last 6 to 12 months, that's really been focused on how the companies operating in hospitality and tourism are responding to the COVID pandemic and looking forward to the bouncing back, which is my next slide. 5 key trends that we're seeing, including this idea of an omni-channel. So I might be running a restaurant, but I also need to be running a takeaway service and probably a home delivery service as well. So I need to be operating on multiple channels. That's what the idea of an omni-channel is. Advanced planning has become embedded into what we do to keep the industry going. Definitely the localism trend has also been really interesting, that as we've all been working from home, during the pandemic, we've become more connected to our local environment. And so that's having a really interesting impact in some kind of smaller SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, particularly those that we've been connecting with in the kind of Oxford and London region. So there's definitely a bounce back happening. One of the hats that I wear at Brookes, as well as being the program lead, is I manage the industry placement program for our students, which is the opportunity to work in a company in the second year of the program. And I think at the moment we have 54 different opportunities for the students to apply to, and that's just this week. So lots of opportunities, and this is all to do with the bounce back of industry, certainly in the UK context. I don't have too much more to say about hospitality and tourism in general, but again, this is kind of building on I think Mark's first slide to really highlight the soft skills aspect of this. I know that Mark was talking about soft skills in terms of studying overseas. Whether we look at the working with customers aspect of hospitality and tourism, or the more general kind of professional skills development, I think this is really what it's all about, if I'm honest. There's something really kind of satisfying and motivating being in a customer-facing role and working quite directly with customers. And I've got my top 10 soft skills for those kinds of roles. I also wanted to cite one of the textbooks that I use with my students, talking about transferable skills. And I suppose this speaks to how this kind of study of hospitality and tourism management is useful for your future career. There are skills that are directly relevant to working in a customer-facing role. There are these general transferable skills that you could apply to almost any sphere of life to do with communication, problem solving, etc. But a lot of very specific skills to do with commercial awareness, self-confidence and empathy, as well as some of the kind of people skills, which we teach throughout the program. So if I had to represent what you'd be studying as a kind of a pie chart, there's a big slice which looks at relevant academic theory. There's another big slice looking at how we apply that to what's happening in industry. There's a very large slice looking at your own professional development and looking at not only developing your skills, but enabling you to be conscious of that development and to be critically self-aware. And we have a module in first year, in second year, and in final year that threads that all the way through your experience with us. And I would say, from talking to the employers that we work with who employ our graduates, that's one of the main reasons that they like Brookes graduates, that not only do they have the skills and the knowledge that they need to work in the industry, but they have that critical self-awareness as well, which takes some time to develop. So just to tell you a few things about the program, obviously we've got a lot going on. So I wanted to highlight a few of the kind of key features. The first thing I would highlight is the mentoring scheme, which connects the first year students to the final year students, and it also connects the final year students to an industry mentor. It's connected to one of our modules, so it's something that you would write about, but I think more importantly than that, the final years really like working with the first years. They get to develop their own mentoring skills, but they really benefit from having a mentor in industry who can be a really good critical friend, can introduce them to their own networks, and is often somebody who can then really kind of support their onward journey as they head out to graduate and to get a graduate career. The placement is really important as well. I think if you're interested in studying in hospitality and tourism, then you really should consider your placement options. Our students have an embarrassment of choices, really. I've got a student at the moment who's working for a restaurant in Hong Kong. I've got a student working for a hotel in Amsterdam. I've got a couple of students who are based in China. And in a normal year, we'd have students across the UK and around the world in restaurants, in hotels, at resorts, working for travel and tourism organisations. It's very, very broad. Most of the prestigious employers that we work with will have a kind of a rotation scheme. So, for example, my student who's working in Amsterdam has worked in different departments so that she can gain a really broad experience. It's a really valuable part of the programme. I know that Mark also mentioned languages. I studied in Paris a very long time ago. We do have free language courses for all of our students at Brookes. That includes Chinese, Japanese, German, Spanish, and French. Lots of opportunities to get hands-on experience, what's called a field trip. You don't have to go to an actual field, but it means experience off campus, where we would normally go down to the southwest of England for a weekend, exploring the food industry down there. Opportunities to study on exchange overseas. So again, I've had students typically go to Hong Kong, China, New Zealand, locations across Europe and North America. We're very successful with student competitions, and I've got some pictures here as well from our careers fair, very connected to employers who, in a normal year, it's on campus. This year, our careers fair was online. A couple more things to say about the undergraduate programme. I've mentioned this kind of thread of professional development that helps you to develop your critical self-awareness. I also wanted to mention some of the optional modules. I think this is where it gets really exciting. So you can find all about the degree programme in terms of the compulsory modules and how it all fits together on our website. But the optional modules, I think, are where you get to tailor the degree. You get to make it specific to you. And as you can see from the slide, I mentioned the sustainable business module. We have options in tourism. We have options more connected to food and gastronomy. We have options that link to events management and managing festivals, creativity, entrepreneurship, innovation, and lots of options that connect to the global nature of the business as well. So things like international management. I've mentioned that our academic culture is very much focused on skills as well as knowledge. Most of the strategy and most of the assessment is coursework. So we don't tend to have a lot of exams. We're more interested in essays, reports, presentations. And again, as Mark mentioned, it's a very interactive teaching style. So I might stand at the front of a lecture theatre and deliver a lecture, but even a lecture would be interactive. All of our teaching involves small group seminars, maybe 20 students in a room in discussion with an academic, and that's where the best learning really takes place. I should quickly mention our Backer Society, one of the most successful student societies at Oxford Brookes. They have lots of events and you can get involved in running the society if you're that way inclined. And I've mentioned the mentoring programme, which I think is one of our key features. It's one of the ways that we really kind of capitalise on our network and our industry links, as well as those guest speakers that I mentioned as well. I'm going to briefly mention the master's programmes. There's a couple of things to say really about our postgraduate study programmes. One is, again, there's a mentoring opportunity. So on all of our MSc master's programmes, the students are connected to a business mentor who's a senior industry professional that they work with. But the other key feature, as you can see from the slide, is we differentiate at Oxford Brookes between students who have studied a programme related to business or hospitality and tourism as their bachelor and students who have not. So that means that we can offer a more specialised programme to students who've got an appropriate background. And then we deal with the students who are maybe transferring from a different subject area on the other programmes. That's quite unusual in the UK, but we find it works really, really well. And there's a nice picture there of my team at graduation wearing our gowns. It's the best day of the year. So just as I get to the end of my segment, before we open up for any questions, reputation is really important. It's a bit like a brand, isn't it? When we graduate, we carry with us the reputation of where we've studied, and we are very, very proud of the reputation of the Oxford School of Hospitality Management. We rank very highly in the QS university rankings by subject. Lucy mentioned in her section, Oxford Brookes is one of the top universities in the UK. We were ranked as the best hospitality and hotel management school, number 9 in the world by CEO World. That was just a couple of months ago. In rankings in various places around the world, we tend to do pretty well. As Mark mentioned, you can choose to study hospitality and tourism management at a university, such as Oxford Brookes. You can choose to study at a hotel school, such as Lyon, etc. I think there are pros and cons to all of those options, to be honest. And I think the challenge for you is to think about what's going to work for you. What I will say about Oxford Brookes is I think my students would agree that they benefit from being part of a pretty big organisation with all the opportunities and facilities that come with studying at a university in a fantastic city like Oxford, sporting opportunities, leisure, student societies, being close to London. It's part of being part of a bigger family, and I think that's why my students would say that they've come to Brookes. The diversity is important as well, and that's why I've included this picture of some of the students. As well as having a very diverse teaching team, we tend to attract a very diverse student body. Last summer, I learned how to say congratulations in the languages of all of my students. And I think it says something that for 75 students in the graduating class of 2020, I needed to learn how to say congratulations in 18 different languages. And that says something about the cultural diversity of each year group of students that we have. And that's a really important learning opportunity as well. You know, we learn by working alongside people from all around the world, as well as building friendships and networks that will last a lifetime. I think I'm nearly done. So I think I'll hand back to Lucy just to finish up by talking a little bit about some key contacts for you to follow up after today if you've got any other questions, and then we can take any questions, I think, in the chat. Is that right, Lucy?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you very much, Claire. That was a really useful presentation. I hope that the rest of you found that that information really useful as well. We just want to tell you about some key contacts. So if we just go on to the next slide, you'll be able to see my contact details. The reason we've given you my contact details is because you may be interested in a host of different programs. And as Claire has already spoken about, we do have quite a range of options within hospitality, tourism, events management. So you're very, very welcome to contact me as your first point of contact. I'm the recruitment officer for European students, so for students from France, Europe. So I'm very, very happy to answer any of your questions. My name is Lucy Hendry, and you can see my email address on the screen, so do feel free to send me an email. Another way that you can also stay connected to us is by having a look on our social media. Now, very topically, today we actually had a student takeover of our Instagram stories from a student who's studying international hospitality management, our undergraduate program. So we do very regularly have students who will take over Instagram for the day and give us an insight into what their life is like and what it is like to study that course at Oxford Brookes. So I would recommend highly that you do check out particularly our Instagram channel if you are on social media. You can also look on our website, of course, and on YouTube to find lots of interesting videos about the city, about our accommodation, about our courses, and lots of other things. We have a chat to a student function on our website. So you can chat to a student ambassador who is studying various different programs. So you can filter by your course, you can filter by nationality if you want to try and find a student from France and find out a little bit more. But that's a really good way also to get your questions answered by current students. They'll be able to give you a little bit more information. And you can always attend the virtual events that we put on. There's always something happening. We've got events coming up, postgraduate events particularly. So it's useful to have a look on our website, and all of the information is on there and you can find out more. But feel free to get in contact with me as the first port of call, and I will redirect you to the most useful bit of information for you. I think that's all from me as well. So Mark, if you're happy, we can move on.
Thanks, Lucy.
Questions.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions that I guess I'll just read them out to you. I think, Claire, you touched on this a little bit, but it would be interesting to maybe hear a bit more on, yeah, what would you say is the difference between a university and a hotel management school?
I mean, I don't know much about the hotel schools, but I think the range and the size is probably where I would go to. That, you know, you come to Oxford Brookes and in the first year you are most likely to live in halls of residence, so in an apartment with maybe 6 or 7 other students, and those students will be from a range of subjects across Brookes. It could be biological sciences or sport or business and management, history, as well as all the friends and the friendship networks that you make on the program. So it gives an extra layer, I think, to the whole experience. And Oxford Brookes is a big university. Lucy might know off the top of her head, I'm putting her on the spot, roughly how many students we have. I know it's a lot.
We have around 18,000 students.
Yeah. Now, I don't think any of the hotel schools are quite that size, and that does bring with it, over 200 different student societies with all those opportunities and all the sports and leisure facilities that we have. So for me, that's the key difference, is really just the kind of scope of opportunities.
I always thought, but maybe I'm wrong on this, that maybe in a hotel school, you would only study hotel management specifically, whereas hospitality is much wider, has a much wider scope. Would you agree with that?
I think that's a really good point, actually. We often get students who want to transfer from a more hotel management based program, particularly across Europe, to come and join us in the final year. So it's something we call admission with credit. We do that sometimes. And what I see when I look at their experience in terms of what they've been studying is it tends to be much more practical, very hands-on. We are, it's important to remember, a management program. So my students will graduate and will very quickly go into roles at the level of supervisor, and then shortly after that, manager. We are training at that level. So we're training students to understand the practical, hands-on, operational side of the business, but ultimately to be working at a managerial level. And actually, some of the modules on the program are drawn from the wider business school. So Brookes Business School has got very good reputation, and we're drawing on expertise from international management, entrepreneurship, finance, etc. I can see Mark. Someone else has got. Mary's got a question about admissions as well.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions about admissions. So yeah, I don't know if you know off the top of your head what you would typically require for a French student on the back, on the French baccalaureate for entry onto the hospitality management course.
I'm happy to take that one, Mark.
Do you know that, Lucy, maybe?
So for French students, so we would require 11.5 in the French bac for a student. We can also accept your English language as part of that. Let me just double check the exact grade. Yeah, so grade 12 in English on your bac. We'd be able to accept that in lieu of you having to take a separate English language test. Although, of course, if you've taken something like IELTS, academic IELTS, then we're able to accept that as well as a number of other English language qualifications. If you're studying a different qualification like IB, for example, we'd look for 29 points. If you're studying something different from any of those, then you can look on our website or just contact me. Let me know what you're studying and I'll give you the answer, hopefully. Yeah, hopefully that helps. In terms of the application itself, I don't know, Claire, if you want to comment a little bit more on this, but generally it's a standard application. We look at your grades, we look at your personal and yeah, Claire, is there anything else specific that you want to add for what you'd be looking for in the application?
No, I mean, obviously grades are important because we want you to do well. I think for me, I would come back to what I was talking about earlier in terms of, thinking about what's right for you. Is it a hotel school? Is it a university program? And if it's a university program, is it Brookes? Hopefully, yes. Or is it somewhere else? Because, there's a huge range out there, and having reflected on all of that, that's what we would want you to communicate in the personal statement in your application so that we can really get an insight into, where your passions are. I tell you what, when I talk to employers, and we do frequently have kind of focus groups with employers, the one thing they always come back to is that what they're looking for is that kind of passion for what students are doing. So that's what we would really like to see, is think, that you've thought about why you're interested in hospitality and tourism and why you want to study that subject for bachelor's.
I don't suppose you require any work experience, or?
Yeah, I just saw that question from Sylvie. Not at all. I think, Sylvie, it's always useful to mention that if you've got it, even if it's just a quick part-time job that you had, when you were younger. But what's more important is why that's meaningful, what you've learned from it. You might have only worked for 1 week in a local cafe, and that might feel like it's not much, but it's brilliant if you can say, well, what I learned from that was the importance of, you know, being responsive to customers, or you know, what I found challenging was a particular thing. So it's not so much what you've done or what your experience is, it's more what you can say about that. That's what we find really interesting. And it's a lot of what we do on the program as well. So I mentioned the year in industry. We have a whole module that students do when they come back from that, where they're kind of engaging in some reflective practice and thinking, okay, what was easier than I thought it would be, and what was really challenging, and how did I rise to the challenge, and what did I learn, and how does that fit into that kind of bigger journey that I'm on? That's what brings the critical self-awareness that I highlighted earlier. So yeah, no need to have any prior experience, but if you do, think about what that brought you.
Just sorry, Claire, on the year in the industry thing, sorry if I'm putting you on the spot on this one here, but is that still possible after Brexit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, pas de quoi, Sylvie. Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. The pandemic was really problematic. So this time last year, a lot of students who were planning to go on placement then had to defer. They had to kind of postpone that for a year. But I mentioned earlier, I don't know about France. I know that you're on a different kind of journey with COVID, but things are really taking off in the UK. And I can see Pascal has asked a question about this as well. I would say there's absolute bounce back going on. Jobs are literally flooding into our inbox in terms of placement opportunities for students at the moment, because of the kind of problems with international travel. Whereas a lot of students would, in normal times, would travel to different locations around the world, we're really kind of funneling students more to UK-based placements in this moment, because my students would start their placement between June and the end of August. So, you know, we're looking at capitalizing on the bounce back. In normal times, it's a more drawn out process. The recruitment for placements would start around October, November for North America, and then it really gets going around January, February time for Europe and the UK. And Brexit is a complication, but we can cope with it. I'd rather we hadn't left the EU, but we did. But we've got a whole team in the business school who provide support to students and staff around careers, placements in industry, also volunteering actually, and all kinds of work experience. So just to kind of pivot from Mark's question to Pascal's question, I don't think students are worried for the future. I've got students who are graduating and going into graduate jobs this week and next week. So it's looking pretty positive, to be honest. Domestic tourism is obviously taking off in the UK at the moment, with tourism to countries that are approved for travel by the UK government. And as that opens up, then all the other opportunities are opening up. But we're finding there are a lot, I mean, really a lot of opportunities, both for placements, for part-time work, and for graduates. That was a very long answer to quite a short question. Sorry, Mark.
That's all right. No worries. And yeah, just to confirm, and Lucy's written that down, but yeah, I think it's still possible to apply for September. Still all good to go.
How exciting it would be to see some of you here in Oxford in September. That would be so cool. That's my favorite thing about webinars and open days, is I get to meet my future students. It'd be so great. I just also wanted to pick up on, I can see Pascal's put a question about internships. We take a very strong ethical stance on internships at Oxford Brookes. We don't promote any internships that are not paid, at least at the minimum wage. So students are welcome to do volunteering, but an internship needs to have a reasonable salary. So I do have some students that are going into internships over the summer, and they will be paid typically minimum £9 or £10 per hour. So as well as the training, they are able to feed themselves and pay for their flat.
Brilliant. I don't know if there are other questions that I missed. Well, no, I think we're good.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to Pascal's. Well, Pascal part of Pascal's question that I didn't see before was about whether students find an internship easily. And I know I talked a little bit about the number of opportunities, but I also wanted to mention,
well, I guess that's with
within the
current
program,
COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, within the program, we've got, as part of the modules that the students are studying on, we are talking about, you know, one of the assessments is your CV, another assessment is your interview skills. So a lot of that stuff is going on. It's not just an option, it's built into the course. So throughout the first year in particular, we're working very closely with students to make sure that they are ready to go when they want to apply for jobs.
And yeah, and Pascal, I think, is also asking same in relation to Brexit, I suppose. But if they do their internship in the UK as a French student, they're limited to 20 hours per week.
I don't know, but Lucy's nodding.
So it depends on.
Lucy's nodding.
It depends on whether the internship is alongside study or whether it's part of the placement year. So if you are working part-time in a relevant internship alongside your studies, so it's during your first year, for example, then yes, you will be limited to 20 hours per week according to visa regulations. That also does include voluntary work. However, on your placement year, your internship year, you are not kind of studying in the same capacity as you would normally be. You're officially working full time. So you're able to work without restriction during that time. So hopefully that clarifies that.
Perfect. Yeah, well, thank you both. I just wanted to, I don't know, Lucy, if you can stop your screen share. So I just had a few slides left to talk about the application process. So I'll switch back to French, if that's okay. Alors, tac. Is my screen sharing? Should be good. Voilà, oui, juste une petite page pub en fait, très rapidement pour vous présenter aussi les services de Study Experience qui peut effectivement vous accompagner dans tout le processus de recherche déjà de programmes pour commencer, d'établissement en fonction de votre profil et de vos critères de recherche. Et puis ensuite, pour monter ce dossier, en fait, donc l'optimiser, on va travailler avec vous notamment sur tout ce qui est lettre de motivation, lettre de recommandation. Je vais vous détailler dans un instant les différentes pièces du coup qui sont demandées dans une candidature. Alors pour Oxford Brookes, mais pas que, en fait, pour l'ensemble des candidatures dans les universités à l'étranger. Mais voilà, donc le rôle de Study Experience, c'est vraiment de vous tenir la main sur l'ensemble des démarches de A à Z et de s'assurer que voilà, tout est en place, que vous soyez dans le bon programme qui vous correspond, que vous soyez bien logé, bien assuré avec le visa et que vous puissiez du coup étudier dans de bonnes conditions et en étant serein d'avoir fait le bon choix. Et donc, ce qu'on va vous demander typiquement, c'est un ensemble d'éléments. La lettre de motivation, ce qu'on va appeler aussi le personal statement au Royaume-Uni, c'est vraiment une pièce maîtresse du dossier. Alors, Claire et Lucie en ont parlé un petit peu et je pense que ça peut-être renforcer voilà, l'importance de cette pièce-là qu'elle vous présentez. C'est l'occasion pour vous de montrer autre chose que vos notes, tout simplement. C'est-à-dire qu'effectivement, on va vous évaluer de manière assez holistique en regardant d'un côté, oui, vos notes, c'est important, mais aussi qui vous êtes. Donc, qu'est-ce que vous avez comme expériences diverses, qu'est-ce que vous avez comme projet par la suite, quels sont vos intérêts. C'est un exercice qui prend du temps, qui doit être fait de manière assez rigoureuse quand même. Vous ne pouvez pas juste le faire à main levée et l'envoyer en 30 minutes. Je pense que c'est important vraiment d'y accorder pas mal de temps et c'est souvent ce qui fait la différence quand même pour distinguer différents candidats quand vous postulez aux universités. Alors, c'est très important au Royaume-Uni en l'occurrence, mais aussi auprès des écoles hôtelières et tout ça. Vraiment, ça va être un critère important. Alors, selon les écoles, on va soit vous demander un format classique de lettre de motivation où vous vous présentez. Dans certains cas, on peut aussi vous demander de répondre à des questions spécifiques et de formuler une réponse. Voilà, on peut vous poser parfois un petit peu des des questions aussi liées à ce que vous souhaitez étudier. Je sais que c'est EHL qui demande des questions du style comment est-ce que vous voyez, comment est-ce que vous imaginez votre contribution à l'industrie de l'hôtellerie ou du tourisme à l'avenir. Et là, il faut pouvoir vraiment réfléchir de manière spécifique au type à la carrière que vous souhaitez mener et à ce que vous envisagez comme type de poste et tout ça. Et ça peut être amené à évoluer, évidemment. Hein. Vous avez 17, 18 ans, beaucoup de choses changent. Mais voilà, c'est cet exercice de réflexion et d'arriver à argumenter de manière claire. Voilà. On vous demandera aussi une lettre de recommandation, en principe faite par un professeur. Alors pour le Royaume-Uni, donc ce sera le cas notamment pour Oxford Brookes, si vous êtes en train de passer le bac, on demandera dans cette lettre de recommandation à ce qu'il y ait des notes prévisionnelles. Ça veut dire quoi? Ça veut dire que le prof doit dire dans sa lettre, ben voilà, on pense que cet étudiant, si tout se passe bien, devrait obtenir une moyenne de 12 au bac général avec 12 en anglais, pourquoi pas, 15 en maths et j'en passe. Voilà, c'est comme ça que les universités britanniques arrivent à positionner les étudiants parce qu'elles ne vont pas évaluer les relevés de notes, contrairement à d'autres écoles. Là, on va regarder vraiment l'ensemble du dossier scolaire. Au Royaume-Uni, on se base sur des prédictions, ce qui peut perturber parfois certains profs. Mais voilà, le système est comme ça. Et c'est pareil, hein, comme pour la lettre de motivation, la lettre de recommandation, ça doit quand même être quelque chose d'assez complet. Hein. Une petite lettre de 3-4 lignes, ça ne va pas vraiment faire l'affaire. Il faut quelque chose qui parle alors cette fois-ci, de vous en tant qu'élève, donc de votre potentiel, de votre performance, de votre participation en classe, des choses que vous faites peut-être aussi à côté. Tout ça, ça permet à l'école d'avoir une belle vue d'ensemble de votre profil en tant qu'étudiant, en fait. Alors, dans certains cas, je ne pense pas que ce soit le cas à Oxford Brookes. There are no interviews, right, Claire and Lucy, at Oxford Brookes, I don't think, for this subject.
Not for this subject, no.
Nope. Mais ça peut arriver dans certaines écoles, notamment c'est courant quand même avec les écoles hôtellières qu'on vous convoque à un entretien. Alors, en ce moment, via Zoom. Mais ce que je vous dirais simplement par rapport à ça, bon, c'est un exercice quand même qui se prépare, donc c'est bien de faire quelques essais avec votre famille, vos amis, des professeurs, pourquoi pas nous, hein, si vous vous faites accompagner par quelqu'un de chez Study Experience, on est en capacité de vous coacher pour ça aussi. Mais ce sont typiquement des entretiens quand même assez formels, où il faut, on peut être surtout avec Zoom, on peut être tenté de faire son entretien un petit peu en pyjama sans trop se préoccuper de son apparence. Il faudra être mieux rasé que moi, en l'occurrence, si vous faites un entretien bien habillé en costard-cravate, du moins pour la partie du haut. Le bas, on s'en fiche. Mais voilà, vraiment faites dress for the job, comme on dit en anglais, c'est ce que veulent voir ces écoles-là. C'est aussi des écoles typiquement où on met en avant le luxe, tout cet environnement de l'hôtellerie très haut de gamme où il faut toujours bien se présenter. Et donc, à cet entretien, c'est l'occasion de montrer que vous avez conscience de ça et que vous prenez la chose au sérieux. Alors, ça ne vous sera pas systématiquement demandé l'entretien, mais ça peut arriver. Donc, si c'est le cas, c'est quand même bien de vous préparer. Et puis, la dernière chose très importante, c'est le test d'anglais, évidemment. Alors, Oxford Brookes, ça c'est très bon à savoir, ne vous demanderont pas forcément de passer l'IELTS ou le TOEFL. Si vous avez 12 en anglais au bac, ça remplit la condition linguistique, donc ce qui est relativement atteignable quand même. Ça correspond à un bon niveau B2 et c'est ce qui globalement serait requis par les écoles ou les universités. Alors, c'est plutôt Oxford Brookes à ce niveau-là va être plutôt l'exception que la règle. Hein. En principe, on vous demandera quand même de passer un test officiel, donc l'IELTS ou le TOEFL que vous devez valider avec un certain score. Entre 5,5, 6,5, parfois plus. Parfois, il y en a certaines qui peuvent demander 7 sur 9, ce qui correspond voilà, à un niveau B2 C1. Et donc ça, c'est des tests que vous pouvez passer alors, pas trop tôt parce qu'ils sont valables 2 ans, donc vous amusez pas à le passer si vous êtes en troisième ou seconde. mais vous pouvez le passer dès la fin de la première. Mais c'est aussi quelque chose que vous pouvez soumettre après avoir envoyé les autres pièces de votre dossier. Donc concrètement, vous avez jusqu'à plus ou moins jusqu'à la rentrée visée pour voilà, fournir votre score et prouver que vous avez bien le niveau requis pour étudier en langue anglaise. Voilà. Et puis bon, dernier point, éventuellement vos relevés de notes. Alors pas pour le Royaume-Uni, on ne va pas tellement regarder ça, mais sur d'autres écoles, on peut vous le demander. On peut vous demander aussi des traductions officielles de ces documents, donc chose aussi qu'on est en mesure de vous fournir si vous avez besoin. Voilà tout pour moi. Si vous avez des questions, évidemment, vous pouvez les poser maintenant tout de suite, mais vous pouvez aussi nous contacter à cette adresse-là, info@studieexperience.fr. On vous enverra demain un email avec un lien vers le replay de ce webinaire. Si vous vouliez revoir certains extraits, vous aurez l'opportunité de le faire, et puis vous aurez aussi du coup nos coordonnées pour pouvoir revenir vers nous si vous aviez des questions ou si vous souhaitiez mettre en place un projet d'études avec notre aide. Voilà, alors, attends, je vais arrêter mon partage d'écran. S'il y a des dernières questions, n'hésitez pas. Je crois que j'en vois pas pour l'instant. Claire or Lucy, is there anything you wanted to maybe add at this stage?
I think there's not really much from me. I've just added a link into the chat box for our English language requirements, so you can have a look at the English language requirements that we would accept. I'm also going to add a couple of other links. One of them is to apply, so you can apply either through UCAS or directly to us, and that link is just coming into the chat now. And the last link that I'm going to add is something that I mentioned earlier, which was about chatting to a student, a current student, a student ambassador. So I'm just going to pop that into the chat box now as well. So hopefully those are useful for you. But thank you so much for joining us. I really hope that this has been an informative and useful session for you.
Merci à tous. Thank you,
Merci,
Claire
bonne soirée à
Lucy.
tous aussi.
Thank you very much. Bonne
Merci
soirée à tous. Et puis voilà, on reste dispo si besoin. Merci. Bonne soirée.
Merci, à bientôt.